Recording in
Okay,
progress.
we're recording.
Good morning, everyone. Today is the May 8th meeting of the Finance Committee, and these are the extra Thursday meetings that we've added for the budget review. Today, we are doing both the regional school budget and the elementary school budget. My first order as calling the meeting to order is to make sure committee members can hear and be heard. And I will call out names as I see them on my screen. Bob Hegner.
Present.
Mandy Johanneke,
Present.
Bernie Kubiak,
Present.
and Andy Steinberg.
Present.
Okay, so we have a quorum, so the meeting is called to order. We always start our meeting, Shannon, with public comments to the extent we have them. So I am opening the floor for public comments. And I see that Jennifer is in our audience, so you brought Jennifer in.
Hi, Kathy. I just wanted to ask if you could add me as a panelist so I can participate in the meeting if needed.
Okay, so you've been brought in to speak, and we will add you as a panelist. Melissa's got that control.
Thank you.
I don't see. Oh, Sarah Bess Kenny is also in the audience, and I think she was coming in for the regional.
Okay, you want me to
Also.
promote her to panelist too?
Yeah.
And promote her to panelist. Okay, there are no other hands up, so I am closing public comments. Yes, that's correct. There are no other hands up. So I'm calling the meeting to order, and I think one way we have been proceeding is to the extent, Shannon, you and or Dr. Z wanted to make an initial presentation. We can start with regional, or we can launch into questions. You can focus more on the questions we sent to you, and you can kind of orchestrate this the way that works best for you.
Okay, I was hoping Dr. Z was going to be here before we started, and I did just text her, and she's hopping on right now. So if we could just wait just a
Sure. And I see Jennifer, your hand is up. Okay. All right.
Dr. Z is joining us now.
Good morning.
Good morning. We are now officially starting the meeting. We opened it first for public comments and didn't have any. So I had asked Shannon whether you wanted to start out with some brief comments, or we've sent some questions. You can assume that we've all looked at the budgets that were posted, both the budget requests for the regional, and I think we'll start with regional, and then we'll do elementary. So I don't know how you would like best to do this, to launch into questions. Most of the questions were sent by Counselor Haneke, So she can focus on some specific ones, or you can lead off. I'm leaving that choice up to you.
So, as you know, first of all, as you know, I'm in the middle school and they have announcements. So if you hear anything in the background, you can't hear me clearly, please let me know and I'll talk up a little bit louder. I just would like to first start off by saying that I'm gonna open it up for questions. Ideally, we at the district offices have spent a lot of time, especially on the regional budget, responding to the 4 towns. Those questions mainly focus on the financial impact. How did we get to those decisions, the assessments, those types of things. The 7.5 pages worth of questions that we collected, kind of walked into an area that I felt went beyond the scope of what we've answered for all the other towns. So myself and Shannon are here to answer any questions, to provide clarity. But I don't understand how the programmatic questions and even asking about specific impacts our overarching budget when we've already met or addressed the deficits. Our budget is not a level services budget. We're not providing the same programming that we had before because of the financial impacts to the town and what we're being faced with. We are actually trying to accommodate a deficit in both the region, and I can speak to the elementary as well. So I think we should just jump right into questions, and Shannon and I will provide, and our chairs are here to support as well.
Okay. So Mandy, and anybody else, but lead off, and what I would suggest is focus on some of the larger big picture questions you had. I mean, but you can go into any way, any sequence you want. And I had just 2 that I'd asked about regional. So
Yeah, no, thank you. And I want to say I appreciate your statement regarding that, but both the regional budget and when we get to the elementary budget, both came in above our guidelines. And so personally, I'm speaking, as a counselor, but myself as a counselor, I don't know whether other counselors and other committee members agree with this belief, but when a budget comes in above our guidelines, we have to investigate, we have to research and sort of ask more questions because you're asking for more money than what we guidelined for. And that means, in my mind, to see whether that additional request is needed for level services or cut services or whatever. And so my questions for budgets that come in above our guidelines get more specific than budgets, particularly for budgets that are not municipal, than budgets that come in at our guidelines. So that's how I approach as a finance committee member. If they were at guidelines, I'd have a lot less questions, but they're not at guidelines. They're above guidelines. So I'm going to start with many of my questions related to the regional budget that got very specific, related to budget line items that increased or well above 10% without any change in FTE. And that, if it was below 10%, it made sense. There's step increases, there's COLA increases for personnel services. Anything around 5%, anything maybe a little higher makes sense. But when a line is increasing, a payroll line is increasing well above 10% without any proposed change in total FTEs, that doesn't make sense to me. I struggle with how that can be. So I'm going to focus on one of them. Although there are many, many more in the elementary school, but we're on the region than in the region. But the region had a budget increase in the superintendent's office budget of $154,000 basically, which is a 60% increase in the payroll side of the budget. Yet the budget book had no increase in full-time FTE equivalents in that section. And so I'd like an explanation as to how these budget lines, particularly in that one, but also in others, can increase by that amount without any increase in number of employees in the office, which is what the budget book said, that the FTEs would remain the same, but the payroll numbers are going up 60% in the superintendent's office. So let's start with that. How does that happen?
So I can help answer this question.
Wait a minute, Shannon, Jennifer has her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to jump in here before these questions get answered. And I'm going to push back a little bit on Councilor Haneke's line of questioning. I understand what you're saying, that you have questions about the innards of the budget. But the school staff and the school committee chairs are here to help the finance committee with whatever information you need in order to make your recommendation to the town council. And regarding the regional budget, what I heard you say earlier, Mandy Jo, is that the elementary has asked for more than the guidance, but the regional committee, I guess the regional budget has done that as well. But guidance is just guidance. Guidance is not something we are obligated to follow. Our job, the school committee's job, is to present, to recommend, to request a budget that we think the school district needs. Mandy Jo, I know that you're a trusting person because I heard you speak at a town council meeting recently about how much you trust the library trustees and how much you trust the town manager to do their jobs. You even stated that it's not the town council's purview to usurp other elected officials. So the school committee has presented a budget that we have approved. The superintendent has put forth a budget that includes cuts in order to come to a compromise between what the schools need and what the town has said it's willing to give. So these specific questions about specific line items within the budget, I feel, are not within the purview of the town council to question or to use as reasoning for why you will or won't approve the budget. So I'm going to let Dr. Z and Shannon answer whatever questions they'd like to answer, but I'm going to push back on the micromanaging of the line items of the budget.
So
Thank you.
Shannon, thank you, Jennifer. Shannon is going to provide some insight and as well into this, and then I'll chime in. Go ahead, Shannon.
So first I just want to start off with the budget book was a draft. And it won't be finalized until we know what our budget will be. And it's been difficult to prepare, not knowing where we would land. So the staffing trends page, which is the end of the budget book, has not been fully updated because this process has been so fluid since it started in October. So those staffing trends are not finalized and not really a good measure for the comparison that you're making right now. And that those staffing trends take an enormous amount of work to do. And with how fluid the process has been, they have not been finalized and not updated to where they should be. But around the superintendent's line, there was some changes of positions of where the staff sat previously and what department they sit under now. Not that those were additions. So for instance, the curriculum coordinator was became the director of curriculum and equity and instructional leadership, which moved under the purview of the superintendent, and that line sat somewhere else in our budget. And the after school coordinator became the family engagement liaison, which sat in a different bucket in our budget and was moved under this one. So that's why you're seeing some of these increases, because originally it sat in different buckets, and those lines respectively have a decrease. And there were some increases to the expense lines under the superintendents, and that's to help support some of our strategic planning and entry work that Dr. Z is doing. So I hope that helps answer that question.
I wanted to expand on that before Mandy Jo jumps in, to state that even though as we received these questions, we only had on the region side one town vote. And you would see, and again, this is question 5 under the region, but it also falls into one of the questions under the elementary. So I'm just saying that this answer falls for both. And so I want to be clarify, we're not going to answer the same question twice. And It's also a mirror effect of the reorganization, and I want to make sure I highlight that Shannon stated that. So you're pointing out that there may be a reduction in one line, but in the reorganization of the offices, in terms of the cost savings that have been met, when the administrator left and we combined two roles into one and moved it under the superintendent's office to move that work, that may look like an increase in the superintendent's personnel line, but it actually is a savings in our overarching spending in terms of what we've had to do to meet this budget. So I don't want you to miss one, to talk about an increase, but not talk about the actual overarching decrease in terms of taking two positions and combining it into one.
So can I follow up on that? I'm looking at page 97 of the region budget right now, not the staffing trends at the end of the line. I did have questions about the staffing trends at the end of the book, understanding that the FY26 staffing numbers are not accurate because they don't show the cuts. But I'm looking at page 97 of the budget book, superintendent's office, that shows no change in FTE at the bottom.
So those FTEs, it's an Excel sheet and it pulls from that staffing trend sheet at the end. And so because that staffing trend sheet is not finalized, it hasn't pulled the updated numbers. And I noticed some of your questions asked why was something on a staffing trend and not on here. It's because the cell didn't pick it up. But those are not completely finalized. And I think that's part of
So, let me make sure I'm clear on this then. So that means that the administrative assistant line on this page 97, just for reference, that goes up from $96 in budgeted of FY25 to $113 budgeted in $113,000 budgeted in FY26. Essentially goes from almost zero to 113,000. The only corresponding decrease in the superintendent side is the one above the curriculum director. You're saying that that's because some other line in some other section of the budget on some other page is decreasing correspondingly, but that the FTEs didn't come through?
Yep. So the FTEs are not updated. So they're not updated because, like I said, because it's been extremely fluid and it's an enormous amount of work to be updated. And I'm not sure if they were fully accurate for the previous years to be an excellent comparison. But yes, so the curriculum coordinator sat under a different line. The family engagement liaison sat under a different line. So you would see decreases within those lines and an increase here.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. My next question goes to overall. I'm trying to figure out where I want to go. I'm going to go with this one since we're on staffing trends. Every year, the school district publishes what they call a cuts list to go with the budget that they pass. And then in the budget, there's a staffing trends line. And my questions, because I know the FY26 staffing trend lines are not listed, they're listed for level services, and then you got to back out the cuts. I'm not talking about the FY26 lines because I know in the budget book you have not backed out whatever cuts might be made or claimed to be made in the budget that gets passed. But presumably the FY25 lines are accurate and the FY24 and 23 lines and all the way back to FY20 and these staffing trends are accurate, that they've been re-updated. And in the region, the cuts list each year have claimed that since FY21, between FY21 from the end of FY20 and the staffing there to the start of FY25, there would be a loss of approximately 49 FTE positions over those years. But the appendices in the staffing line show that at the end of FY20, there were 308 total FTEs, and at the end of FY25, there were 319 FTEs rounded, which is an increase of 11 FTEs. And so I'm trying to understand how during the budget season, the school district says the budget you pass will result in X number of FTEs being lost, but then when you publish the budget, even 3 years later, If you're looking at what was passed in FY21 and the cuts that would be said to be lost in FY21, the FTEs there, 3-4 years later, the staffing trend for FY21 or FY22 or FY23 show actually increases in staffing. So can you explain that disagreement between the statements made in the spring regarding each budget that is being voted on and what type of FTE losses there will be, and then years later, the FTE staffing trends you report in your budget that do not even come close to agreeing with those statements that were made each spring?
Or I'll start and then Shannon, you can jump in. It's called running a school district. We plan for the students that we have, and then we have students who come in or students whose needs change. Every school year, including FY20, and I'm sure I wasn't here, but I'm sure including the year when there was COVID and staffing needs and trends had to change to meet the student needs, we had to pivot and change. So there was impact to the budget. Maybe there was an operational cost that had to be reduced so that we can increase the number of personnel. I know in this year only, in me coming in at the beginning of the school year, we had to meet the needs of Wildwood, who planned for a certain population of students, and then there was an increase in another population. So I find that to be a programmatic question to say that one, we're reporting our accuracy and throughout a school year, because we plan in the beginning, we plan for a certain number of students, we plan for an enrollment trend. It's not a definite number, it's a projected number. And as a public school system, we accept the students that we have, and we have to educate them and meet their needs. And that often causes us to make some shifts and changes, and we may go against what we have projected. And even now in the spring, we are projecting how we can operate a program somewhat, not perfect, a basic program to educate our students based on the funding that we have.
And so I just want to add, when these budget or staffing trend lines are added into this budget, it's a snapshot from the beginning of the year, and like Dr. Z said, it changes by the time we get to the end of the year based on what the needs are. So in FY22, it had the highest staffing increase, as it was marked whenever the 22 budget initially was created, at 335 FTE, and then by FY25 it was reduced down to 315. And in that 22 year, that was the height of our the effects of the pandemic, and there was significant student need and stemming from the learning loss, and we had specific behavioral concerns and special education demands, and there was adjustment counselors and additional paraeducators. But you can see that reduction from 22 versus 25 when looking at the trends.
I didn't know whether you, Kathy, whether you wanted to recognize
Sure, Jennifer, sorry, I
Thanks.
was just making sure Shannon was finished, yeah.
Thanks. Sorry, I'm juggling multiple obligations this morning. I had to step away. I didn't fully hear Mandy Jo's question, but I just wanted to say, I was trying to point something out, something that I had to learn, which is that the budget book that's published each year, the very detailed budget book that has many, many pages and charts, that represents a level services budget. So that line item budget book does not include any cuts. That's a level services budget. Even though in the same document there are as a different table with suggestions of cuts, the line item budget represents a level services budget. So if you look at that budget book that's published in the early each year, from year to year, that doesn't represent what actually happened. That's a level services budget. So I don't know if that is causing any confusion, because it confused me at first. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that, and I explained that I understood that for FY26 staffing trends, and so I was focused on the FY20 to 25 change in staffing trends, which should be, when published for an FY26 budget, already accurate and representing what's actually on the ground for the prior years. I guess I struggle with this because every year a lot of the conversation around the need for an increase in above guidelines of allocation in budget above guidelines is to save positions in the schools. Yet it does not appear that those positions are actually being lost when you go back and look at prior budgets and the staffing trends in the budgets. So it makes it hard as a counselor when we have to make decisions between do we allocate and fund money above guidelines to the schools to save positions, or while losing positions in the municipality budget, say, or the library budget, say, or do we keep the school budget at guidelines where there are claims that even more positions will be lost, yet when you go back and look at the historical trends, the positions are not being lost, at least according to the reports in the budget book. So I guess I'm trying to figure out how a budget can be set in spring. We cannot fund these positions, and then a year later be reported that those positions were funded. Help me out.
I'm gonna repeat what I said, right? And I'm gonna say this. At no point of any part of this funding, of this budgeting process, even when we started at the region, and this is for region and Amherst, I'm answering this question for both. Did we not say that we had to make very difficult decisions to make sure we implement a basic programming, meet the basic needs as a public education system? When we plan for that, we are planning for a projected number of students whose needs we already know of. So then we reduce positions. We say that, okay, we have this year, we have 30 third graders. We know next year we'll only need 2 fourth grade teachers. All right, we can reduce 1 gen ed teacher as much as we would prefer not to, because ideally we should keep that gen ed teacher, because then we can actually shift that person to where we're able to meet the need. We have to cut a position. We have to let individuals go. We have contractual deadlines to meet and let individuals know that you can't stay in our employ for another year. We do that. The year starts. We then end up with 50 fourth graders. We then end up with 57 fourth graders. So now what we are doing is the position that we have cut, we now have to look within our budget whether we have a contingency line built in that's not under personnel, and shift that contingency and shift that cost so that we can meet the needs of students. Because the one things we cannot do as an educational system is turn a child away. We have to meet their needs. What we have to operate within is unrealistic fiscal constraints and guidelines, because that's what you said. There was guidance provided by the finance committee that gave us some unrealistic that we would not be able to function. And we then had to project and say, as a school district, and with the school committee, this is what we would need to even function close enough. Not at where we are this year, but close enough to where we are at this year. And then when the school year starts, what happens. A school district operates. We have students with varied needs shift, needs change. We need to make sure that teachers are able, and sometimes we have teachers at one building, we have someone at the next, we have to increase the FTE, we have to shift, and that's what occurs when you run a school system. But the hardest part is that when we are asked to meet these fiscal constraints, we do have to present a budget close enough or within a range that we can implement the system that we need to. So there's no perfect, I'm very happy that it shows the true reflection at the end of the year of what happens in a school system. When you go and you say, you can only oblige at 4%. A school system does not sit the same as a library. I'm sorry. I respect the work of librarians, but we don't do the same. We have to meet the needs of human beings. And they're vary. And these human beings are going to become our educators, are going to become our librarians, are going to become our police officers, and the firefighters that we are all making sure that we can employ and we can shift and change. But the problem that comes in is holding the educational system within the same guidelines and frame as every other department. We do not have the same moving needs and needles that they do.
Thank you. I'm going to shift to a couple of hopefully are just clarifying questions, not about staffing at this point. The budget book said that special education IDEA funds the trend analysis in the special education IDEA funds stated that the districts, and this was in both budget books, quote, sharing of funds between Amherst region, and Pelham also shifts each year. Can you explain how IDEA funds that I personally thought, maybe this is just my misunderstanding of IDEA funds, right? How what I thought were attached to individual students or specific programs can shift between districts each year in terms of aren't the monies you receive specifically to a specific district? So how would they share funds amongst districts?
Yes, so DESI allows us to do a consortium agreement, which is when you can combine Amherst Pelham region into one application, and all of the allocations for each district go into one application, and it's held in one district. But that does not mean because it's held in Amherst that all of the funds go to Amherst. On the back end, we track the funding for Amherst region and Pelham, but we just have the grant in one system. And because we have 3 systems, it's complicated. So DESI has initiated this to help the administration of the grant and sorting it out. So there are still specific funds required for significant disproportionality and equitable services and resolution funds. And we charge, so for if the grant is held in Amherst region, we would do a bill back onto that Amherst grant account line, and vice versa. Historically, the IDA grant was originally held in region for all 3 districts. Then the new GEMS platform came out, and the IDA grant is also tied to the 262 grant, which is early hood child education, which is preschool. And how the new application was coming out, DESI said you can't hold it in region anymore. You have to change it to Amherst. So I believe it was FY24 we made the switch where we kept the whole grant in Amherst because of the way we had to submit our application and how 262 was tied to it, and only Amherst and Pelham had early childhood. We couldn't keep it in region because the way the application is submitted, it wouldn't work in their electronic system the way we were doing it. And before it was an Excel spreadsheet, 3 separate Excel spreadsheets for the application submission. So it was easier, we could manipulate it. But that's not to say that Amherst, Pelham, and region, just because that's where the grant is held, doesn't get any funding. It's just for easier tracking purposes as one, but they still get all of the funding. The same thing goes for our Title I grant. And however, there's a new change for FY26. Historically, we have always held Title I in Amherst for Amherst and region. There's no Pelham for Title I. And we would do the same thing. But for FY26, DESI has now said districts are not allowed to do the consortium, and there will be, in fact, 2 separate applications, and it will be one in Amherst and one in region. But that is not what they said for IDA, so we are going to continue with what we have been doing.
Thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it. And you covered the Title I. I was assuming when you talked about it both that it would be for both. So thank you for that. Okay. Capital for the region. I know we already approved we didn't have to vote, but Amherst likes voting positively on the capital allocations each year. And we did that, but it struck me as strange that capital always seems to be a full borrowing, even on items that are slightly smaller, like $10,000 items and $20,000 items. It's always presented as we're borrowing this large amount to do all of our capital expenses, which increases the cost for a $10,000 item if you're borrowing $10,000 and paying it off over a couple of years. So is it possible for the district to pay capital expenses without borrowing? And if so, why are the towns not requested to, why are we only ever requested to approve borrowing and not others? And this could just be something that maybe that shows up somewhere else, but can you explain why we're only ever, as a town, being requested to approve borrowing for capital and never any other sort of, for regular capital expenses, no just cash payments to do capital and expenses?
So we, in our operating budget for maintenance, we do have a budget for things that come up during the year that we didn't request in capital. And if we were to move the capital requests, some of those onto our operating budget, it increases it, and which means we would require more reduction in force. I did want to know that historically, the regional school district has not asked for any IT needs in our capital requests. So you'll notice in our IT lines, there's a significant amount that we budget for the IT capital needs that our operating budget already covers. So we don't ask for everything to be borrowed in capital. We do manage some of those on our own account lines. But I think if we did, while we're, especially right now, while we're still in crisis and have these large deficits, it's only going to grow those deficits.
Let me clarify. I was not asking whether you could move them onto the operating line. Why is the capital request only ever a borrowing request? If you look at our town capital request, there's borrowing sections and there's cash capital sections. Capital we pay for out of cash within the capital side, not the operating side of the budget. And I guess my question was, can the region do that? Send a capital budget to the towns that has a borrowing section and a non-borrowing section that's just 100,000 in capital expenses that won't be borrowed, that will just be paid in foreign cash without being it on the operating line?
That's an excellent question. I don't know why we've never done it in the past, but I am taking notes so we can do it in the future.
That was more of the question, not trying to push your
Okay.
capital onto the operating side, but how do we pay for it in cash? Can we? Okay. Because that
Oh,
would presumably
And
save money.
I think what goes with Mandy's question, Shannon, I mean, we had a question on our capital budget. To the extent it is a capital expense, you know, whatever your threshold is, moving into capital does make sense to all of us. You know, it wasn't a questioning of having it there, including IT. We get an IT request, as you know, from the elementary school, that's wiring and computers and everything else. So it wasn't questioning that. It was just, if you borrow, you have to pay interest. So it's slightly more, it's somewhat more expensive. So for the little items, it might be cheaper, but there may be a reason why that's always, because it has, what you said is it's always been done. Yeah.
But we can definitely look into it and see where that, get as much history as we can possibly get.
Jennifer has a comment on this, I think.
Sorry, it's not on this specifically. I just wanted to encourage finance committee members, both individual members and Kathy as chair, to consider what questions you need to have answered in order to fulfill your responsibility of making a recommendation to the town council. I'm going to go back again to Councillor Haneke's comments on the library project, which was that we don't have perfect information, but it's not our job to manage the contract or whatever it was about the library. You may not have perfect information about the budget requests, and the documents are complex and they bring up lots of questions, and you see things and you want things explained, and I totally get that. I have lots of questions, but what information do you need in order to fulfill your responsibility to the town council? Thank you.
Thank you.
Couple more questions. If others have questions, they can. I'm happy to speak.
I have two, Mandy, and when you're finished, I'll do it.
Okay, I'm going to go with four more, and then unless you want to jump in before that, no, three more actually. Maintenance of the new track facility. The track will be finished, I believe, this fall. I've heard that it'll be a 3 or 4 month project and it starts in June. I could be wrong on the timing though, in terms of the finishing of the timing. Does the budget include maintenance costs for the new track and field facility? Does the FY26 budget do that, with my presumption that it will be open in FY26? And if maintenance costs won't be incurred till FY27, what's the plan for incorporating maintenance costs in the FY27 budget?
So I think that maintenance of the track has been a hot topic, and it's one that I believe needs to be open for discussion between the region and the town. And so I would prefer we didn't comment on maintenance until we've had that meeting and had the opportunity to clearly outline what that's going to look like.
And when you say needs to be
Oh.
discussed between the town and the
Right,
region.
because I know that
what
there's
is
a lot
your-
of there's a lot of discussion around in terms of like how the land and the use of the track and so all of that needs to be very clear. You know, whether it's a community track or like just a region, like there's a whole host of questions that have come up around the track, and I feel like the project is underway, it's moving, but we need to make sure that all of those questions are answered. And I like to pull everyone in the room and collaboratively have that conversation around use, maintenance, and everything so that it's one messaging that moves forward. We do know that we would have to incur some maintenance, just like right now, I think we have shared tracks. Like a lot of our football games and different things are not played on our tracks. We're gonna lose 2 tracks in the upcoming year. So there's conversations and MOUs and different things that have to be put in place. We do have, Shannon and I did have that conversation. I know it is on her forefront that we're gonna have certain things to maintain, but I think we need to be clear on what we're maintaining versus not, so that we can adequately plan for it and budget accordingly.
And just may I ask a follow-up of, are those conversations, do you foresee them being basically staff to staff, or the elected bodies being involved in those conversations too?
I know, for example, for myself at the region, I wouldn't make a move without my chair in the committee knowing what it is in terms of agreeing. You know, they may have designated me to do things, but I communicate clearly with them. So I would hope that whoever's in the room, would make sure that they have that conversation with whoever they need to if they were not designated to. So I would usually start off the conversation, it'll be me and the town manager, and then he's usually very collaborative as well. He brings everyone into the room that needs to be there. And I will do the same.
Thank you. When I listened to the DESI, when DESI came to a regional school committee meeting back in March, as a counselor, who has been asking for 6 years to have the regional agreement updated to reflect the town's new status as a city with a manager and council, no select board and town meeting. It was quite disjarring to me during those conversations to hear DESI repeatedly refer only to select boards and town meetings and adoptions of budgets of select boards and town meetings, failing to recognize Amherst's change of government, which presumably stems directly from the regional agreement not recognizing Amherst's change of government. So I guess my question is, what's the status of amending the regional agreement to recognize Amherst's government appropriately and respectfully and accurately? Because it seems to be disrespectful to continue to maintain a regional agreement that does not recognize one of the 4 towns' governments appropriately and accurately.
So I have come in and have been working with DESI to review the regional agreement. That's how we were able to get into it. That's how I got it. And there is more than just Amherst status that needs to update. There's a lot of things within our regional agreement that needs to be brought into the current code and law. And so I would say that we do have opportunities to call 4 towns meetings. And it would be great if at the 4 towns meetings, individuals were able to come in and have consensus and quorum so they could vote and we could make those shifts and changes. So I am not opposed. I think we need to actually revisit it, but that's a lengthy discussion. So I do ask that the next time we call a 4 towns meeting and we send the agenda ahead of time, if that is one of the agenda items, that everyone just be prepared to have that conversation. And I'll pass it over to my chair.
Sarah Bess.
Hi there. Yeah, so I think we started having the conversation not just this year at the school committee, but previous years about wanting to look at the regional agreement. I know it had been on goals for previous superintendents. And this year, Dr. Z and her team have been meeting monthly. I think almost since last summer with DESI. I've been in a few of those meetings, so we all know it needs looking at, and we are working, on the back office part of things to get to a place where we can have more of those in-depth conversations. And and updating the regional agreement so it works, you know, more collaboratively going forward. So yes, it is on the list of things that we we have been working on.
And
Thank
it's,
you.
and I guess Mandy, I would just observe it's beyond the wording of giving Amherst the right name and substituting select board and council and that it's beyond wordsmithing. Yeah, it's content, substantive.
Okay. One last for the region, and then the remaining questions are really elementary specific. And I know we would started on region, and I know you've been answering for both when they apply to both, but I've tried to keep it to region side. And this is we're, as everyone will say, the budget is the overall budget for the town is in crisis. It's not just the educational side of the budget. Budgeting is a problem when inflation is rising well above the property, Proposition 2.5 limits. What is the regional school district doing to adjust expenses over the long term? What are those structural changes that the regional school committee and school district is looking at to address our new reality that costs are increasing well above the ability for revenues to increase? We can't increase our revenues at the same rate that costs are increasing, and that presents for everyone a real problem. But what's the regional school district doing to start adjusting those expenses over the long term to adjust to that reality?
So I'm gonna jump in here, and Shannon, you could jump in as well. And that goes to being able to have being able to have a strong enough strategic plan in terms of where we see ourselves and see the school district moving towards in the next few years. Right now, coming in the first year and having to see what historically, and that's a part of the issue as well. Historically, what Amherst and the region and is known for, and the programs and the offering the world languages and all of those things, and hearing individuals say that my child left Amherst Regional speaking Russian, and now you're hearing now we can't even offer enough world languages. So when we think about students that we lose and the choice expenses, our choice, I'm thinking of students who go to charter schools and who leave out and leave choice into other districts and go to the Performing Arts Academy. Those are all things that were offered within the region. We are actually losing our marketing value every time we make and cut into our programming. And so we have strong athletics, but we still have to find a way to adequately budget athletics. So we want to offer a program to ensure that we can keep our students. We can actually bring students in and invite them to want to come in, but we are consistently trying to meet budgetary constraints. So for me, my answer would start with a strategic plan, which we've already started that work. And trying to move towards a strategic budgeting process in identifying what our priorities are and how do we budget towards that in terms of programming. And that's one of our first steps in making sure we can project outwards and start to adequately plan. But a part of being marketable, a part of our expenses and our expense lines is the number of students that we lose to our charters, to other programs, even students who choice out, students who were unable to provide them with the needs, so we have to send them to an out-of-district program. So those are all things that impact us because our budget doesn't allow us to adequately provide those programs. Shannon?
So actually, I was going to say something similar. We're just reaching the budget portion of our strategic planning work, and in order to really have a solid plan and project for out years, you need to know what the goals, the mission, what this planning is, what do we want to represent as a school, and so when we update our district-wide strategic plan, then we'll know what we work towards, and we can look at our budget and say, does this fit within our goals and missions, or does it not, and what can we do differently? I think we don't have that foundation because that foundation was not updated in a really long time, so we're getting that updated, and now going forward, we'll be able to adequately plan and see where we might reduce this program because it doesn't fit within our mission anymore. So like I said, we're just getting to that budget planning with the strategic work now. And I'm hoping after that it'll help lean us towards the future out years.
Thank you. Kathy,
Um,
the remaining
yeah.
questions for me are in elementary, so I'll
Yeah.
pass it
Okay,
on for
so
now.
I'll build on this particular question with the two I have, and then the third is around elementary. So during the discussion that the regional school committee had on option 1, 2, and 3, when you were looking at potential budgets, and as you know, the council was behind going to the 4.8%. There was a discussion of curriculum coordination between the middle school and the high school. And I'm asking this in the context of your strategic plan. As I understood it, the question related to if there's a course choice offered in the middle school that's not offered in the high school, could a high school student walk over and take it? And I'll flip it to have the question be in reverse. If a middle school student is ready for advanced Spanish, they've coming up from the Comanantes program, can they walk over and take Hispanic literature or something over in the high school? To me, and I'll extend that to art, dance, music, any of the programs where, as you've got declining number of students, trying to maximize the opportunities that exist between the two. What I heard was not now, you can't do it because the structure in the middle school has a team structure, and I understood that, and so you can tell me I'm wrong, that what that did was the class room periods weren't coordinated in a way. And I want to ask it also in the high school, can high school students easily take a course at UMass or Amherst, assuming that would help you with AP? And for context, my son, and he graduated in he's 45, so it gives you a sense of when he went through the school system. He took math in the high school when he was a 7th grader. The schedule allowed for that fluidity, and kids in the high school were taking math and physics and some other sciences at either UMass or Amherst. So I'm looking at it as a way, when you're thinking about your strategic plan, of maximizing the use of what are resources given declining enrollment. So that's my general question on trying to think of walking across the street between the middle school and the high school is where can that happen now, and what would it take to make that easy?
So Kathy, I'm gonna say this. This happens in a reverse where it's not so much the students across the street, but I'm gonna say the teachers do. The arts are world language. I'm not even sure. There's a series of teachers that actually teach both at the high school and at the middle school. So that occurs where students actually benefit from the knowledge of those teachers in both buildings, but at their current grade level. So we are maximizing resources in certain areas. I believe that your other question was around students being able to take courses at UMass. And so I believe right now we have students who actually leave the campus and take college courses. We started discussion, the team ourselves, to include the high school with Holyoke Community College to come in and offer a course. We want to pilot it in the fall for students in one of the class periods. So we're actually starting to look at programming and things that we can do, and we're going to build that into our strategic plan. The question around the alignment in the scheduling of the middle school and the high school, there is work that needs to be done to better align the schedule outside of just the team model, but also how the schedules will work so that we could better coordinate. And looking at a deeper curricular alignment to allow students to take advanced courses in middle school, that's something that we are actually open to. But we also have to be careful of the staffing needs and that we have in terms of both buildings. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, and well, it does in part, the teachers moving back and forth, but I was thinking of, if you have a dance teacher and there aren't enough students, or if you have an advanced Spanish teacher in the high school, you know, where it's Spanish 3 and 4, and your 7th grader comes in ready to take that, having the student be able to go over. And what triggered this in my mind, Dr. Z, was there was a question about Latin 1. And if it's offered in the middle school, but it's not in the high school anymore, if I want to take it, and the answer was no, not now. And I just, if it's not possible now, I think it's one way of thinking of a strategic plan that for any course that's offered, if there's potentially more students that could take it, then you can sustain the course. And so there was a lot of fluidity way back when, and this is when there was a very rich curriculum at the middle school and the high school, you know, in terms of choices, but there was a lot of fluidity around math and science and language. And the students, you know, they had to figure out how to do it schedule wise, you know, like when am I walking over to the high school? So that was my question. And the only other one I had is I would really appreciate it if both the region and the elementary school regularly gave us updated lists of student enrollment, just trend lines, you know, so that I can go to DESE and get it. I can't always get it for the most current year. But I think when Jennifer, you're pushing on us to, you know, come back as the finance committee and recommending, I think not everyone knows on how steep the decline has been over time, you know, on what stress that does on the range that can offer. But B, it makes it hard for us to align. Let's look at staffing and with all the accurate staffing levels with the student enrollment levels. So I think it would be useful to get it. And Shannon, that was one of the questions I submitted. At one point, you gave us the rolling average of the 5 towns going back 20 years. And I just think, you know, both at regional and elementary, it would be helpful to somehow regularly get it or have it on the ARP site so I can find it. Because I have to pull it down from DESE, and I'm always worried that someone will say, that's not the accurate numbers. We have better numbers. So that's a request, an information.
Actually, I think that request, Jennifer has right. I said, I don't think that request is one that's difficult. I think it just should be made through the chairs of the committee so that they would know, you know, so they can request it. But Jennifer has her hand up.
Okay.
Thank you. With all due respect, Kathy, it's not the town council's job to make sure that FTEs are lining up with the budget, or it's not the town council's job to make sure that that the number of FTEs is lining up with the number of students is lining up with the budget. The school committee does receive enrollment data regularly, at least annually. If you have a question about that, you can ask one of the school committee members, and we can easily point you to where on our website that information was presented at what meeting so that you can look at it.
Okay, and that means that I can't go on the ARP site right now and get a 10-year enrollment trend. Is that correct? I have to go. And just Jennifer, let me push back a little bit. The finance committee, the way it's written, its role in the charter is we're supposed to be making sure things line up across. We have investigative duties. This is not a challenge that the numbers aren't accurate. It's more that we don't even have them. And so if we want to show where enrollment has gone and where staffing has gone in simple tables to say, you know, Mandy's questions about staffing is that the schools have been making very difficult choices. We need those numbers to say the schools have been making very difficult choices. In the town, we need to be able to say we're under stress as enrollment goes down with these things. And yes, I can, and actually I do have a history file on this, and if you would prefer that I just get it from DESE, I can just get it from DESE because that's being reported up. Because others are asking why Amherst spending per student is so much higher than surrounding towns. You know, and is it the mix of students we serve? Is it the courses we serve? Whatever. And so at some point, we all have to be prepared to answer that. So I'm just pushing back a little on your saying these aren't appropriate. And the final one is Mandy's talking about long run, and we'll shift to elementary. If schools need an increase that's well above 4% a year, well above, to sustain what we will quickly not have much left for anything else in town, given what our revenue projections are like. We get to quickly, the whole budget is schools. So we do have to be thinking about not just this year, but next year, and with hopes that everyone is focused on how tight the situation is. And I'm ready to segue into elementary, and I want to say that I was one of the people that did an extensive piece begging DESE, the board, not to accept the enrollment expansion at one of the charter schools because of how much the charter funding formula hurts schools. I am prepared to do whatever I can, and I think there's potentially a legal case looking at what the charter law says, that they have not been deciding these right, but I don't know where to go with that information, and I am happy to work on it, because that's one of our issues in terms of where the state puts budget money in called education, but we don't get it in K through 12, and it's a declining share. So I realize that that's the big picture, Chapter 70, charter, the circuit breaker, how the circuit breaker, all of those are stress within our system. So I think the more we can be seen as working with you, this is not a challenge against you, it's working with you to make the case at the state level. But meanwhile, we have to fund the rest of the town. So I do think these questions are appropriate. Jennifer.
I just wanted to ask Melissa if you could bring Sarah Bess in as a panelist. Thank you. She had to leave and rejoin. Thank you.
So I think we can shift to elementary. So I will, and I'm looking for any other of the finance committee members. So this is an information gathering session for us to be able to write our report. Yes, thank you. Bob.
Yeah, if this is just, I'm a little confused by the budget that was presented in the budget book on page 20. It doesn't, first of all, it includes guardrails, which DESE has said they won't support, and it is different than the budget that I believe the school committee passed, which of which the share that Amherst has is 19,744,008, which is 4.81%, which is different than any number on the page of page 20. So if you could just explain what is on page 20 versus what I'm seeing and what we all thought was an agreed upon budget.
That budget book was done before the budget was voted. And it was just a draft, and it won't be finalized with what was actually voted and what we actually receive until the budget is approved. So that was a draft snapshot in time from where we were at one point, but it hasn't been updated since, and it won't be until we finalize the budget.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Point of order. I'm sorry. I know we've moved on to Amherst, but I need to ask again that Sarah Bess be brought in as a panelist. I think, Kathy, you're able to do that as co-host. It seems like we're having some overlap in discussion, so I just wanted to make sure that Sarah Bess has the right access.
Did Sarah Beth, did we lose her?
She has to drop off and then join again. Sarah Bess and I both didn't have had other obligations this morning. So if you could just promote her to panelist, that would be great.
Okay, I am not, I don't think I'm co-host. If I'm, I am co-host, I can do it. Okay, I think
she's declining the promotion.
She's declining the promotion.
Tried 3 times. So she must be engaged in something.
Okay.
Thank you, Melissa.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, she's back. Okay, Mandy, I think we're shifting. I want to make sure other members of the Finance Committee, Bob asked, I think the key question is, don't stare a lot at the large budget books because they don't necessarily represent the point in time that we're looking at. So, Mandy.
Yeah, I mean, I'll respond to that as we move to the elementary school. That's okay, I guess, except how is anyone supposed to evaluate the needs of a district, and even a bottom line number if the school committee and staff readily admit that that bottom line number is still just a draft when we're asked to vote. I mean, that's part of my struggle with, we're being asked to vote on a number that is above our guidelines that the department says is just a draft, and we can't rely on those numbers. You know, for elementary, I'll bring it back to the superintendent's office, and on page 81 of the elementary budget, the superintendent's office budget for personnel expenses is increasing by 340% without any listing of an increase in FTEs. And the school committee voted a budget that said we need that 340% increase without FTE increases. And it needs to be, we need more money than the guidelines offered. They voted a budget that is 2% above our guidelines and 1% above what the manager has proposed. And that 5% the manager's proposed includes bridge funding. And we are here to try and evaluate whether that request is necessary above our guidelines. And we're being told or pushed back on that we shouldn't try to figure out whether that request is necessary above our guidelines. But in my opinion, it is necessary to consider whether that request is reasonable to be above our guidelines. And then you look at a number like 340% increase in the superintendent's office budget, again on page 81 of the elementary budget, without any increase in personnel. It's 145,000. That's entirely basically covers the bridge funding that we're proposing to use free cash to fund the elementary school for. I think it's reasonable to ask, is the bridge funding necessary given some of these lines that are presented in the elementary school budget? So that's my pushback on some of the statements that have been held. The manager's budget includes bridge funding of approximately $269,000 in free cash to bridge between the current fiscal year and FY27 when the new elementary school opens. Presuming that at the opening of the new elementary school, there will be cost savings that do not affect level services. So I have a lot of questions around the use of that funding. What will it be used for? What in FY27 will projected reductions in expenses be that do not affect level services because of a consolidation of schools? And how will, given the discussion always revolves around cuts to level services, will those consolidated efficiencies be represented as cuts to level services next year, or be represented as a new level services numbers that just doesn't need as much money because there are consolidated efficiencies? I've tried to summarize 3 or 4 of my questions around what's happening with the budget when Fort River School opens, and what is the intention around the efficiencies in expenses. Utilities are one I can point to, but efficiencies in staffing with a consolidated school that will result in level services but less staffing, presumably. It's one of the questions I have is, will it? Things like that. So I hope the school district staff can speak to that.
I'm gonna start off, Kathy.
Sure,
and jump
absolutely.
straight in.
No, absolutely.
And I want to say that it's all about framing and how things are framed. And I've learned that, especially stepping into this and being from a very different culture in terms of how I am perceived and interpreted and how things are perceived and interpreted. And the first thing is that the budget book for the region went through a series of iterations. The budget book for Amherst went through a series of iterations, especially at the region. And I don't want to leave this the way it was, the way that it's being perceived, that because when you sit down and you say the superintendent's office is getting a 340% increase with no change in FTEs, please note that I don't speak in FTEs. My finance team tries to get me there, but I don't. But what I will say is we have not increased. The increase, and again, we spoke about this before, and I'll bring it back up again. One, what you are seeing is through the consolidation and shifting of positions from one part in the budget book to another part which sits under my office, there is a shift. And that in itself, one of those changes happened because of a fiscal issue that we were correcting. So just so you understand that there is a back end conversation to this, but this is not the superintendent's office is joined in creating this big increase in umbrella or balloon in spending. This was a line item that was someplace else that is now consolidated into one role that now sits under my office. We had an administrator of curriculum. We had a strategic equity coach. We took those two roles. We made it one role. That role sits under the superintendent's office. That's now the director of teaching and learning. What you will see, we had a director of facilities and transportation. We had a food services person. We consolidated that into the director of operations, which now sits under the superintendent's office. So what we did was we looked at different line items. We restructured the central office. We are still finalizing the restructuring of the central office. And that caused a shift in the amount of not positions or percentage that sits under there. But it is a reduction to the overarching budget because that cost no longer sits as another line within the budget someplace else. So I just don't want there to be publicly stated that there's this grand increase to the superintendent's office, again, without going back to what we've answered. I also want to say that even though we've said the last iteration may have been February that you received, because that's the date, every time we are pitched a scenario, it takes up to no less than 7 to 14 days to start and dig into shifting a budget book. So the last iteration of scenarios that we were presenting is what the budget book is based upon, to the point now that we are working to finalize and get the correct percentages, especially at the region, onto what budget we are going to work on so that the team can dedicate their time to finalizing that budget book and making sure the data in there is correct. We were honest and transparent in that conversation. And I know people may be tired of hearing me say the word transparent, but that is what transparency is: integrity, honesty, and openness. So that is where we're at. We gave you the last draft. Additionally, in terms of moving forward in the programming for the upcoming new school, the Amherst New Elementary, please tell me why everyone is speaking as if we are disregarding that there will be a sixth grade program. We are not getting rid of sixth grade. You may not have 3 buildings. You will still have 3 programs under the Amherst Elementary District budget. The 6th grade is not joining the region. It will be housed in the region. It will need its own staff. It will need its own leadership team. And even if we are to split costs with the region, there will still be a cost for a 3rd site in the Amherst budget. So I really would like you to like us to make sure that we frame and we correctly state things so that when it is released to the public and explained, they are able to understand it. So yes, we are planning for that. There is 2 buildings. There will be 2 buildings that may have to have maintenance and things, but there will also be an agreement and a lease agreement with the region in terms of housing the sixth grade within the building, because the regional agreement does not allow for sixth grade. So there will still be an Amherst programming. Those students will still need services. They will still need staff. They will still need a counselor. They will still need a psychologist. They will still need probably a leadership team to man that sixth grade academy. And I would like to recognize the Amherst chair to join in.
Thank you, Dr. Z. May I speak, Kathy? Just
yeah.
making sure.
I also saw that Shannon's hand was up and went back down, but go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you. So it is the school committee's job and purview and legal responsibility to evaluate the needs of the school districts. It's no other elected body's job or purview or responsibility to do that. Our job is to evaluate the needs. It's not appropriate for the town council to say, but really, do you need that? We gave you a line item and you have a complicated budget to vote on. You have many competing needs. You have difficult decisions to make, but micromanaging the line items of the 200-page budget book is not part of that responsibility. The budget book is complicated. You just heard Dr. Z explain why it might look like one page of the budget increases by 300%. That looks really sus, but it's because things are being moved from other areas. Things are being shifted around so that we can make things work. And that's one of the reasons why digging in at this level and this level of detail isn't fruitful and is not, I don't see how that helps the town council and the finance committee to decide on the line item unless on the line item of the school within the town's budget, unless it's because you don't trust the school committee and the superintendent that you don't believe us when we say this is what the school district needs. I would urge the finance committee and specifically Councillor Haneke to extend the same trust to the school committee and the superintendent that you extend to the library trustees and the library director and the town manager. You trusted them on the library project. You trust that this is what they need and this is what they can deliver. I'm asking you to extend that same trust to the school committee and the superintendent. Regarding the draft, the budget is a draft because you all haven't approved it. That's why it's a draft. Things change because things do. And it's complicated. And the request that the school committee has made, the Amherst School Committee has made, is the most recent request that is in front of you. It's different from the budget book because Amherst's budget process is complicated. It's different from the budget book, but the request that we voted on is the request that's in front of you. I had one other point, but I can't remember it. Thank you.
Okay. So Andy has his hand back, and what I want to suggest is we have in the manager's proposal right now, we have 4% plus another 1% as a bridge. It would be good to focus on that as a starting point in terms of where does that leave you for FY26 and where does that leave you for FY27? And so Andy, I see Andy's hand.
Can I say that our chair has already issued that directive and asked us to do that? So the Amherst School Committee has already issued that request of us as a district. So they are responsive.
Okay. So Andy.
Okay, thank you. I have only asked to speak once, and we have construction going on in my house. It's just a quiet moment, so it's particularly good. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Z and Shannon for their presentations and the two school committee chairs. It's been very informative, and I really appreciate your presence and hard work. Things that I've been thinking about as we've been going along is, and Jennifer's brought up the role of the school committee and looking at the needs of the schools, and we're caught in the position that we have to look at the needs of the schools as presented by the school committee, but we also have to look at the needs of the other segments that are funded out of a very limited budget. And so it is a very difficult process. It always has been. Having been on the finance committee and chaired the finance committee under the old form of government when we were a town and had a town meeting, it wasn't different. We always had to try and balance out the needs of the various components that we fund. And it is just in the shift of government has put the council in a little bit of a different position than what a town meeting was doing, because we do bridge a little bit into both ends, but it still is a responsibility that we have to look at an entire budget and how it's divided. A couple of comments on things that have come up earlier. When a question was raised by Mandy regarding the question of what is capital and what is operating expenses, and having been at this for a long time, those are defined in the regional agreement. And so I encourage everybody to go and look at the regional agreement and how operating expenses and capital expenses are defined. It's actually a fairly significant issue, because how funds are allocated amongst the 4 communities, the formulation of how that works is different for the operating and capital. And you have to get back into both the regional agreement and the state statute to fully understand that. My last comment is that I have been very concerned about our schools for all of the reasons that we have heard from Dr. Z and the rest. We are competing with charter schools. We do need to work together to try and figure this out. We have to think about efficiency. I appreciated the point that was made about the 6th grade costs, because that is not a disappearing expenses, and I recognize that. I was actually going to ask that question, but now it's been addressed, so I don't have to ask the question. The last comment that I just wanted to make, and this goes back some period of time, but the last time we had a regional planning board to look at how the region is structured and whether we could expand to a 4-town pre-kindergarten to 12th grade region. I was chair of that planning board, so I've been around this issue and the complexity of this issue for longer than I want to now recognize, but it is complex, and I think that it is important that we work together with the schools and our fellow municipalities in whatever format we can have to really do some thinking about what is the best way to address all of these issues. I look forward over the next months to trying to make some real progress on that. And maybe I will add one more thing, and that is because I'm on the Mass Municipal Association Fiscal Planning Committee, we've had I have been pressing very hard on getting the MMA to take an aggressive position on charter school funding formulation. And I was pleased that because of my efforts, I got that into the list of priority legislative matters for the MMA for the current legislative year. I also want to note that one of the leaders who is working on this issue is our own Senator Comerford. And so we really just need to continue to be in consultation with Senator Comerford and supporting her and providing her with the information, because I think that of the regions in her district, and there's several that I'm sure she's thinking about, but we're one of the important ones that I know is very very much on her mind, to provide her with the information that she needs, because she's working on the development of a bill for the legislative session that she's going to late file. She shared that information with me. So those were just my overall comments, and thank you.
Mandy.
And Kathy, you can go first.
Okay, I just, I'll start with two pieces. One is right now, the proposal that's on the table from the town manager in his budget book is 4% plus another 1%, so 5% increase. And in looking at various scenarios you did with the school committee, you had one at 5.5 in terms of what that budget might look like. So my basic question is, what does 5 look like for you? And you don't have to answer it today, but it would be good for us to get the information on what a 5% increase looks like. And I understand that under the 5.5, there were a loss of some jobs compared to the 6, which was the voted out. So we have 6 having been voted out. That's a question, a request to get from you some composite of Shannon and Dr. Z. What does 5% look like? So we can describe the difference, not in terms of dollars. I know what the dollars difference are, but the dollars in terms of impact on you. The second one is more of a comment. From what I understand, when Amherst originally went to DESE to talk about the 6th grade moving up, they came up with this, it needs to be an academy. I strongly suggest going back in to get that decision rethought with a good argument on how integrating it within the middle school will be better for the kids, the curriculum, and total budget. And when I mentioned this to Mindy Dom, she said, if you need someone to go in with you, she would do that. So I think we have some legislative support. So just I understand there's a program that will have to be set up for the 6th grade, and they have to have physical space, but with the other towns not coming in, Desi said it's not a full region. So just, I would try to think of a way of strategically revisiting that to make it work for the best of the kids. And if you may have done that already, but just in terms of thinking they can be in the music and the art and the language programs, they're going to have classrooms. And we did support in JCPC, and it's in the town manager's budget, money for the capital side of that, of whatever you need to do to retool the building, the rooms, the offices, the doors. So that money is there for the 6th grades. So those are my two completely different. One is, what does it look like with 5% for the elementary school rather than 6? And then the second was more by way of a comment.
Sure. The first question is, and I think I stated this briefly, but it may not have been clear, that our chair and the committee has already asked us to present what the impact is going to be at 5%. And so once it is presented to the chair, then it will be made public, because the committee is who makes the recommendations for the budget. The second portion of your question is, when I came and I asked Desi the same thing, one of the issues again is the region is a 7-12 region. So the regional agreement sets the grade levels for what occurs within the region. It is not a DESE thing. It is actually what's in the agreement. My understanding was that the other towns were not willing at the time to open up for their sixth grade to join the region. So I'm not sure, we have our monthly meeting coming up, we can ask a question. I have some ideas around it, but again, this shifting and sharing of staffing, that's a budgetary concern between the two. It would not fall within the lease, it would fall within the budgetary constraints. What I would like to say is that the programming and program structure, that is also something under consideration, but the grade levels that the region serves is not a DESI thing. It is the regional agreement that set the grade levels. And so the regional agreement would be where that provision would have to be made. If there is some special legislation, which I know there are districts in Massachusetts that have received special legislation, or at least one district around how those districts work. We did hear about that when we met with Desi one time. I am willing, once if the chairs approve, to talk about that programming and what that may look like. So if you would like to make that connection, we're open, but it is not a DESI, it's the agreement at the region that sets that the region is 712.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm asking it purely on a both student level, but a cost level, that you don't want the administrative costs of it to be higher than they need to be. You want the richness of what the kids can have when they get there. Yeah. So those were my two. And thank you. I guess so for the finance committee, the elementary school committee is asking for it, and so we need to report back by the end of May. So we will need that information through the school to us on the 5% side.
The school committee meeting, our next Amherst school committee meeting, is scheduled for, it's every Tuesday, so May 20th. So I would say to reach out to, Jennifer and just clarify if that's gonna be a item, it probably will be. And then just letting her know that you would like to vote right after.
Okay.
She's on the call, so.
No, I'm sure she has heard this since her face is still here with us. Mandy.
Yeah, so a lot of different areas of questions. So on March 18th, 2025, the Amherst School Committee was presented a document that had a Tier 2 5% budget increase over FY25 and what would be able to be added in versus a Tier 3 6%. So am I hearing that document might not be the end document for potential budget finalization at a quote 5% budget, that I shouldn't rely on this March 18th document that the superintendent presented to the Amherst School Committee regarding potential budget bottom line numbers? That's
No.
question number one.
Can we go question by question, Mandy? Because
Sure.
you have a lot. So I just want to go question by question. So the first answer is the reason why you cannot depend on that is because contractually the RIF notice dates have passed. And some of that projection had individuals within a unit of our bargaining, one of our unions, that I'm unable to RIF at this time. I'm unable to go back and say due to this this time at May, I can RIF. So that has to change. We have to also operate within contractual agreements and make sure that we can meet the programmatic needs. So yes, it will change.
Thank you for that. As I'm making notes, I'm the one that has to write this summary out. Many of my questions, I know the school committee members, many school committee members thought were out of bounds regarding consolidation when the new building opens, and regarding sixth grade. But I'm going to ask them anyway because they all have budget implications. And as fellow counselor Andy Steinberg said in this meeting, our job is to figure out allocations amongst all the budgets. And that requires us to look at the whole bottom line number of a school budget, not necessarily how you're allocating it, but is it a number that can serve the students, or is there savings in there potentially, and structural savings? So I've heard a lot about moving the 6th grade to the middle school as if that is the only option. And so I guess my question is the school district looking at other options for when Fort River opens about how to accommodate all pre-K to 6th grade students within the district? One of those options is obviously the one that's been on the table for a while of the 6th grade moving to the middle school, although that looks different than when it was put on the table at this point in time. But are there other options that the school district is considering that might present more cost savings than sort of what seems like the default option of 6th grade in the middle school as a separate academy with all the costs that you have enumerated might go along with that? I asked some questions specifically about maybe a new location for preschool. But there's also, in my mind, options of temporary classrooms at Crocker Farm or at Fort River. You know, like there's other, in my mind, there's other possibilities. And I don't want to enumerate all of them, but is the school district considering more than just 6th grade at the middle school regarding when Fort River opens?
So I'm going to say that as the new superintendent coming in and having received the information in pieces, I have walked through in my brain and sometimes pitched ideas to different individuals of different ways that this could be done, right? What could it look like? Where could things be housed? Not just for 6th grade, but even some of our educational programming. One of the things I'm going to say is that the educational program and plan was voted upon in 2022 by the school committee, and any new educational programming and plan would have to go back in front of the school committee for the new school. The second thing is that when this wonderfully great new school was being built, apparently based on what I've read or learned about the history, is that there was an initial conversation about it being more of a mega school. That did not pass. Then there was this idea of now where we're at a capacity of 575 students, where you were taking the 2 largest schools within the district and combining them into a building with a capacity less than each of them hold currently. So, I mean, and again, this is my analysis coming in. So if each school currently are over 300, and then now you're putting them into a building that houses less than 6, like where were we putting that additional grade level, that additional 100 and something students? Crocker Farm had a feasibility study and they could not hold the balance in a larger capacity. We're also going to have to look at redrawing of district lines and rezoning. This is our conversation that we've had at the school committee around moving forward. The question that you're asking is 6th grade coming to the middle school the only option? Coming in, I don't think there's a lot of physical space that's available. The old where Summit used to be held is not in any shape to hold anyone. I believe the is it North Amherst School? Is it the other? That's now offices. So really there's not a lot of space unless someone has identified a separate space. There could be different grade configurations that could be done between the 2 schools, but we also have the programming to think about. And I would have you to say that I had a conversation with my team, and one of my concerns is that in the planning of this, we did not think about the equitable placement of programs. I personally would not put every high intense special needs program in one building with a bilingual program, with a gen ed program, and put that all together and now consolidate staff and now consolidate everything into this large building and then move a grade level out without an adequate plan. So if we're talking about space analysis, the only space analysis that was done is a space analysis that was approved. And that was to move the 6th grade into the middle school, and that's what we're planning for. If there's more cost efficiencies and suggestions, me and my team are open.
Can I follow up with that regarding a long-term plan? If and I haven't looked at the projections, presumably the district has projections on future enrollments. The projections we saw were from 2018 when we started this process for the new school.
We're running new projections so that we can, the ideal plan that we have, or I have, is that by the end of this school year, we're able to adequately inform the community and parents of what the 2026-27 timeline is going to be, what that transition is going to be, when would they hear about what. But again, that's something that I would like to get approval, like to share out with the committees and then make sure we move from there. That also will determine our communicate. Really, I want to share our communication plan. I want to say, we're going to communicate this time. We're going to communicate that time. Where I have a meeting coming up, I think next week, with the district team, the leadership, to kind of walk through what do we need to do, where are we, what do we have. There's a lot of segments to this. A lot of different people in small sections are working on different small things. And so there's a lot to move forward, but again, we're open to consideration and hearing some additional feedback.
Yeah, my question about enrollment projections actually goes further, which is if the projections result in continuing declining enrollment, and I don't know whether they do, obviously, because I haven't seen any, but if they do, will the district be looking at the possibility of a short timeline for 6th grade in the middle school and then reconsolidating them back into the 2 Crocker Farm and whatever the new Fort River's called? Like, is there thought process about could the 6th grade move to the middle school be temporary if there is continuing declining enrollment?
So I would look at that projection in a different lens. I wouldn't look and plan. I would plan and think about declining enrollment, but my lens would be, how do I increase that number? What do I do to bring students into the district? What programming do we need to shift and offer? That's the lens that I would look at it. How do I rejuvenate and revive the district so that we can actually, continue to prosper, thrive, but individuals aren't just moving here for one thing or the next, but they're moving, or their students are coming into the district for our programs we offer. So if I see a trend of decline, it's also to turn around and say, what's going to be the cause of that? Is that population? And how do we fix that so that we can adequately have students and serve students? So yes, on both regards, we would look at it and plan for a decline, but would also plan for the decline in terms of how do we change that from going downwards to upwards.
Thank you. And can I ask one more about how the FY27 budget, I want to go back to this, how that budget is intended to be presented at this time. If the council passes the budget as proposed by the manager, it will start with any increase will start at whatever the 4% number is this year, not including the bridge funding of $269,000 as we discuss guidelines for next year. And then there's also the consolidation of 2 schools into 1 to consider. And as I talked about earlier in my conversation, in my questions, presumably reduced expenses on both payroll and operating non-payroll expenses because of a new building. And I'll stick with the easy one of utilities at $260,000 for 2 buildings that if none of them are operating, in theory, the building we're building is complete net zero. There will be 0 utilities. I'll start with that one. In theory, right? That's an easy one that's not talking about personnel. But so my question is, when the FY27 budget is presented, will that $260,000 decrease in utilities be presented as a reduction cut on the cut sheet that the school committee likes to use? Or will that be already included as what is called level services? And similar efficiencies that are found, is the intention of the school committee to present them on the reductions, cuts, and additions list as reductions? Or is it an intention to present that as already removed from what is considered, quote, level services?
So I know Shannon is going to jump in, and you're asking us what the school committee is going to present. That's your question.
No,
So
what the superintendent and finance office will present to the school committee as their, quote, level services versus cuts reductions sheet.
So in essence, and Shannon can expand on it, FY27 will be a completely new or reformatted budget book, because we would be presenting a new structure in the district in terms of how we operate. Shannon?
Yeah, so our entire accounting is going to need to be adjusted for the new school and this sixth grade academy and how we do it. So the budget book I'm anticipating will look completely different because I'm gonna start it semi from scratch and completely rejuvenate it. But how we present savings, I don't know how we're going to do that. Is our intention to do it as an ad cut? Hopefully not, because hopefully the percentage of the budget that Amherst is guiding, we are align right in, and there is no deficit, so there is no need for this cuts list. But I think in terms of building that budget, we're going to create these new account lines for this new school and for this sixth grade academy. So I think it would make the most sense that it's already built into the budget, but before it becomes, oh, this is what we want to add, or this is what we need to cut. And hopefully we're not at a position where we do need to cut. But I mean, I think that's a little premature. At the point when we're ready to discuss it, you'll certainly have clear guidance of what we did and how we did it and which format it's presented.
Thank you for that, Shannon and Superintendent.
So I'm conscious of the time, and thank you very much for staying with us and the clarity of the answers. I'm looking around the committee for any other questions, and my understanding, what we heard on the elementary school budget, is that we will get information from you on what does the 5% increase look like in terms of the way you operate. We will get it in after May 20th. So we will be needing to write up a section on this. You know, we have some of us have been watching the Zoom meetings and collecting the material as you've gone along, and absolutely you've gone through multiple iterations, but it would be good that we don't grab the wrong document, that we grab the document that represents what the current thinking is. So that's just a request from the chair that we get that as soon as we can. And you know, with the enrollment trends, since I can ask the school committee chairs to get it for me, but I can also just do it, and I think I will just do it. It's a useful thing for us to be able to have in the report, you know, be showing, because I believe the last time I looked on elementary, the decline had stopped. You've leveled off, and that's news as opposed to a steady decline. And I was on, as you know, I'm on the building committee when DESE was projecting where our enrollment would be out a decade to decide whether it's a 575 school, a 600 school. We asked for 600, they gave us 575. You know, so it was, you know, it's like they had projections based on birth rates and cohorts. So yes, those are what they are now, and there's a little bit of growth capacity in the schools. If you look at in the new school there, if you look at the floor layout, which I think you probably have, it appeared that there was some flexibility in it for not like one more child than 575 would get us over. So in any case, that's what we're building, and on May 20th we'll be raising a beam and celebrating it. So are there any other questions, and any information that you feel that would be useful that you don't think we have would be great to get, and otherwise we will proceed with the information we do have. Mandy?
Yeah, a question going back to the region, and this is more of a planning question than a budget question, because there's been a lot of talk about it. So if someone could speak to the plan regarding Four Towns conversations, I've heard a lot of various conversation amongst various towns and town committees, if you read the paper, about relooking at the regional agreement assessment method that is literally set forth in the regional agreement and potentially modifying that. We broached it a little bit in terms of looking at the regional agreement for more modifications than just getting the town's Amherst's form of government referenced properly. But can someone speak to the plan around getting the 4 towns to come together to discuss these issues for FY27 and beyond as we move out of FY26 budget conversations? So I can put that into our report regarding budgets and votes.
Yes, so I will say that we do need to have the 4 towns come together and create, whether it's a review committee, whatever it is, to start to delve in and address what needs to be updated. We will continue to meet with our DESI regional reps. They have committed to walking through with us and citing the specific areas of our regional agreement that are out of compliance with the law. So that's at least one step. And then I've been telling everyone, if you're not pleased with your assessment method, the regional agreement is what sets the assessment method. So I can't, it is not a Dr. Z, it is not a Shannon, it's not a committee thing, like that's where it is, and that's where the commitment would lie. But there is more than just the assessment method, there's more than just the name of Amherst that needs to be updated and brought into compliance. And so I think that I need to just plan out and probably send out an email suggesting some dates and start to plan what that's going to look like. And the first thing is to call the 4 towns and have everyone commit to what it's going to look like for us to review, vet, and update.
Thank you.
Thank you. When you get that, it's great to hear that you're working with DESI to identify what parts of the agreement are not in compliance with the law, that if we're looking at modifying the agreement, what we really do need to modify. When you create that sort of, I guess, annotated regional agreement, I guess you could call it, if that's going to be discussion at a 4 towns meeting that you call, I guess what I would request is that you provide the towns with that annotation well in advance of the 4 towns meeting so that the town committees can potentially call their own meetings to discuss it before 4 towns.
Okay, definitely.
So I'm not seeing any other hands up. And I thank you both very much. And Shannon's talking about starting from scratch is awe-inspiring. But I think you've got the right person to do it. So thank you very much. I think you're looking at a group whose kids went through the school system, most of ours, well, some of us long ago, but we're here because of the school system and loved it. It is a treasured resource, and it makes the town what we are in terms of people come here because of our schools and our teachers and the staff. So please take all of this. This is looking for support within the confines of the budget constraints we're facing as a town. And I was pleased that the town manager found a way to go with what the council had asked for, the increase in the 2 schools' budgets beyond the guidelines that we were working with. And looking at, if you look at the big budget book on the projections for FY27, they look awful. 27, 28, 29, and 30. The budget book is going back to being conservative, but back in the, at best, 3% world, not at 3.5%, not at 4%. So between getting over 26, is what was the manager's comment on Monday, 26 is going to be the easy year as opposed to the challenge in many ways. I mean, including the reconfiguration of what you have with the schools, with the 6th grade and everything else. So I thank you all for the amount of time you're devoting to it and the thoughtfulness. And Mandy, it looks like you other than the chair doing thanks, you have,
I have my own thanks that doesn't relate to the budget that I said on Monday night, but I've got the superintendent here as well as some school committee members. So I wanted to re-thank redo what I said on Monday night during counselor comments, which is thank you to the superintendent and the high school principals and leadership for sticking with the performing arts group in the face of what's been going on. Is my knowledge that many American schools pulled out of the Montreal Festival, given what has been going on with border crossings, and Amherst School District stuck with a border crossing and unknowns to allow a majority of the performing arts students, nearly 100 students, I believe, to travel to Montreal for a 4-day music festival. And it's really important that you guys did that. And I wanted to thank you for sticking with the performing arts department in making that happen.
I want to say, but thank you for that. And on behalf of the high school team, more so, it was great. And to receive the photos, the videos, to hear their performances, it was just awe-inspiring, and it lit up my day on some long nights last week. So it was really great to do that. And it just shows the dedication that our educators have to making sure that every child has a place within our system. And so thank you. And thank you, Kathy. We may not have answered all 7 pages of questions, but because we still have we have districts to run. But when I say that we are student-led, student-driven, and we're trying our best to do what we can for students, this is what we're doing. So we're here to answer questions. We're here to support the process, and we ask you to just, vote in the positive. So we will definitely make sure that after the meeting on the 20th, through the chair, you'll get the information. It'll be available. But we do ask that we're able to just at least continue to provide our students with just a basic educational system.
Thank you. And with that, very positive note, I am going to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And I will call a roll call vote. Bob?
Aye.
Kathy's a yes. Mandy?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
And Bernie?
Support.
It's unanimous with 2 committee members absent. Thank you again for all of your time and for all your work. We are adjourned at 10:58.
Recording stopped.